Okay, so on today's episode of What's in the Shop, so we'll kind of start off boring and we'll kind of go to the more interesting things. First thing, we got I believe this is a 13 Ram 1500 with the 5.7 Hemi in it. This vehicle is having a miscellaneous misfire. Again, as it seems like always, they went to a couple other places, they looked at it, they couldn't figure out what was going on. Allegedly, the intake air temp ended up throwing a code for that, and then he said the ABS was going crazy and a whole bunch of other stuff for the coolant temp sensor and so forth. Now, if you end up looking over here, you'll be able to end up seeing that this battery has sulfuric acid that's leaking out through the seams here. And as well, they have been cleaning the terminals on here, but you can see how the calcification of the sulfuric acid has already started to happen. So, as I was explaining to him, a couple issues happen here. When your battery is this bad, typically they last between 3 to 5 years. When they get this bad, the actual lead plates will start to calcify inside. They'll have a corrosive layer over top of them. The plates won't be able to hold any of the electrode if it's either the cathode or the anode. And the only place for it to be displaced is inside the sulfuric acid. So it'll start to boil off. The batteries will swell and expand. They'll get extremely heated. In worst case circumstances, the sulfuric acid can actually boil and it'll smell absolutely horrible for miles. It will smell like sulfuric acid and trash and sulfur and eggs. So it's definitely something that you don't want to end up exerting. And another thing you can end up seeing is this does have some external wiring on it. This guy does have lights and everything, front and bumper. So that can be a one overall issue because if the vehicle is running low on voltage, things like the injectors or the throttle body or your instrument cluster or headlights may not end up working. They may be dim. They may intermittently go in and out. If there's not enough voltage or amperage being supplied to the component, it can wear it out. It can burn out some of the resistors or capacitors inside of it. So, um, we're going to go over the electrical charging system, and he said typically when he gets on throttle is when um, he notices the misfire, but you can see it even at idle, it misfires too. One other thing you'll be able to notice is he has miscellaneous ignition coils replaced. On these Hemis, on these Dodges, they have dual coil spark. So on the 300 Chryslers or any of these, they all have 16 spark plugs. So, and they're pretty expensive too. So if one of the igniters on the split fire ignition coil starts to go bad, or if one of the drivers, because I do believe these are smart coils, it'll end up causing issues there as well. Don't buy any of the cheap ignition coils that you see on Amazon, eBay, or any of these other sites. I know it may seem tempting getting the plugs and whatever not for 20, 50, 100 bucks, whatever it is. They may last you about a week before the impedance starts to drop on them. The voltage will start to degrade, and it'll may run okay at idle, but when you go 15, 20 or more percent on the throttle, the vehicle will start to misfire. Then you'll have to go ahead and replace them. Go ahead, spend the extra $100, get you your Diamond or your Delphi, or unfortunately AC Delco, or whatever is name brand that's going to be good, and or has a warranty that they're willing to back. That's an issue I see quite common typically. So, and it could even just be an injector that's clogged up or that's not injecting correctly due to multiple different issues. Again, the injector could be getting weak and it may not be supplying the pulse correctly. It could even be the PCMs doing it. As I mentioned to him, I see common typically on vehicles like this, they're shady. They'll go in there and they'll block certain codes that way. So if it does have a misfire, it won't pull up on the dash, and you can't pull it up with the scanner. Um, so that's kind of a problem and everything. So I'm going to check that too. I want to go into the ECU. he kept worrying, oh, well, what if I have to replace the engine, or what if the ECU is bad? I mean, if I go and do a checksum on the ECU to compare it to the original base file, it will tell me if a sector's bad or if something's not reading correctly or something's been changed. So we'll be able to determine that. And then again, I'm going to check the ignition fire count and the injector pulse width and the milliseconds um, and the latency on them. That way, so I can determine if they're actually working correctly. And it could just be something simple. I mean, a $20 bottle of Royal Purple Max Atomizer, just some diamine ethylene, a detergent injector cleaner, could clean some of this stuff up. But as a lot of you know, with these Hemis, the lifter, well, pretty much all Dodges or GM, they have really bad oiling to the crankshaft and the camshaft. So it could be just a lifter, which it does have a tick there in the back. So it may not be priming all the way. The coil spring could be collapsed on it because you do have the variable displacement cylinder shut off, or whatever they call it, where it shuts off 2 of the 8 cylinders and turns it into a 6-cylinder. Technically, it wears down the engine. Honda did it for a while, and it destroyed a lot of their 3.5 V6 engines. So don't end up doing it, but you can remove that overall function. It doesn't help the vehicle at all. It degrades it, wears down the cylinder walls and everything else, and you lose performance and efficiency and emissions. So it's stupid. So, all right, enough with this one. That one, you guys obviously know I'm going to go ahead and fix it. It'll take me about an hour, maybe more, who knows, and we'll be good to go. So next thing we're going to take a look at, we got this 11 STI here. Went through, did a couple things, cleaned up the vehicle, complimentary for the client. I really love the blue and the reflection off the light. Regardless of fact, did an inspection on this one. Needs pads and rotors. The pads are wearing unevenly on each side of the pistons or each half of the caliper. Reason being is there's air or water in the system and they haven't been bled in a long time, so they're unequally being proportioned through the pressure, through the ABS, through the master cylinder. And another issue is this is the master brake reservoir, and you can see how the fluid is actually gelled up in there. It even has like some grease and some other nasty crap. Fluid's supposed to be absolutely clear. That's not clear. Same thing with the clutch slave reservoir, same situation. So we definitely need to end up flushing that. I recommend every 3 years check or replace, or maybe 25,000 miles. The brake fluid, reason being, brake fluid boils around 400 degrees, water boils around 181. So when you're driving through town or going through the mountains or driving spirited, the brakes very quickly end up getting heated. Subsequently, hold on, I need to turn that light off. The fluid inside the brakes will end up getting heated, subsequently boiling the water, causing air, and you will either get a pedal that will go down to the floor, it'll become very squishy, you'll apply the brakes, but the car won't really stop, it'll keep going, and as well, you may have brake pads that are wearing unevenly, you may have calipers that'll lock up on you, especially if the ABS system is very sensitive, but it doesn't even have to be sensitive. And it can cause some other issues with more of the luxury vehicles, the Land Rovers and the BMWs. It becomes all types of haywire, so I'm not even going to get into that right now. But other than that, the AC compressor on this one was locked up. As you can see, it was literally painted here. This is actually supposed to spin free by hand. It's not, because it's completely locked up. So it was dragging, screeching, causing a lot of noise. Luckily, no metal was sent through the vane pump of the AC compressor itself. So we ended up flushing the system. We ended up recharging it. We used the lubricant, the dye, and the stop leak in one setting. And then the remainder, I think 10 ounces, we just used regular R134A. And as well went through and cleaned up the engine bay because it was kind of quite dirty. So this one, it'll be back. He wants to swap out these headlights. I do see they are LED ones, and he definitely could use a polish too, and a sealant or clear coat over them. But it needs new power steering fluid too. I mean, it has a built engine allegedly. Obviously some other goodies, but mostly stock overall. It does have some nice HHR wheels. As you guys know, those things are freaking expensive. But I said, went ahead, got all this stuff situated, so was able to save them a lot of money in comparison. I mean, I think the AC compressor was about $300. They retail for over 600, and then I don't know. I think for the flush and the AC refrigerant, it's about 80, $100, and some other miscellaneous things here and there. Had to retap the threads because whoever put the bracket on for the AC compressor last time ended up buggering up the threads, so I had to rechase them and whatnot. So I am really surprised to see this still has a factory radiator because they typically leak around the edges of the intake, or they may crack, or the fins will get kind of a rock or something that'll hit one of the coolant passages. So it's unfortunate. So I made another little video on this car. So this thing's pretty cool. I like it. We'll start it up here in a little bit, let you guys kind of listen to it. And I want to bleed the brakes for this client just out of a complimentary just, I don't know, more or less out of a safety thing. But as I said, I already cut him a really big break, and I got to end up making money at the end of the day. I've done that several times, overexerting extra work to help people, and I don't even get a thank or a review or any compensation for it. So next thing is, this one's a 19, obviously Subaru WRX FA20 DIT. It is no longer going to be DIT. It's just going to be FA20T. So I can't give you guys a teaser like that and just kind of let you guys off. So this one, yeah, it has some goodies on it. It has, I don't know who manufactures this intercooler, but it's an upgraded intercooler, upgraded J-pipe from the turbocharger going in there. It's a good thing. So the overall plan for this vehicle is we're going to raise up the suspension. We're going to get wider and higher sidewall on the tires. So these ones are actually the incorrect size. I believe these are 225 40 18s. Factory's 245 45 18. So the first number is the width, the second number is the height, and then the third number is obviously the diameter of the circumference of the actual tire or the wheel. So we're going to go with the 245 45 18s. We may go 55 on the sidewall. I haven't determined just yet. So we're going to fill in this overall gap because he wants to be able to track this vehicle, take it up to the mountains, drive it around. Before, the car was literally slammed down to the ground. The suspension geometry was set up incorrectly, so if you even lift the vehicle up off the ground by 1 inch, even that, which is probably about close to an inch, the whole entire rear wheel would pop up with it. So it's a very common issue that I end up seeing with a lot of vehicles. Since I got an SD card for my phone now, I'll be able to actually explain it to you guys. I prefer to do it with the front struts, but so at least here on the rear, this is a shock style coilover. The best way that I can end up explaining this, sorry, I'm getting text messages. Actually, the guy about this car, he wants to do something carbon fiber. Regardless of fact, when your car is sitting on the ground, technically the chassis sits on the coil spring. So when you compress this is going to be your preload on that coil spring. You want to have a preset preload on it, that way so when you're driving down the road, you go in and out of places, the vehicle can stay level and be able to maintain. Now, with that being said, this lower section here is going to be your extension. How far do you want the overall travel of the suspension to end up being? So by adjusting that and the inner monotube inside the actual coilover, the strut itself, you'll be able to utilize a combination. And as you know, up here inside the vehicle, you have your dampening adjustment, which is for how much of the load of the vehicle is going to be suppressed on the strut itself. I'm probably not doing a good way of explaining this, and the easiest thing I can say, coil spring rides on that, your adjustability on height and everything is going to be the slower collar, but you want to try to keep, especially these Subarus, the axle at a 45-degree angle. This one here, let's see, what is it sitting at? Yep, there we go. So here on the back, you want to actually kind of keep these as parallel as possible. So you can actually see how we have a negative degree of alignment here on this rear axle. So we will actually lower this down. I don't know. I can't end up explaining this that well to you guys, but actually, I think I am explaining it well, but I don't know. Did I make a video about the front? I don't know. I have to take the front suspension off and try to explain this because doing it with the rears isn't really the best. But